My daughter chose her dad's side in the divorce and started calling his affair partner her mom, so I also started ignoring her. Now when her stepmom has given birth to her child, she is getting ignored in that family, and now wants to come back to me. I 39F never thought I'd be in this situation, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. It all started 3 years ago when my ex-husband and I finalized our divorce. The process was messy, filled with heated arguments and bitter accusations, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. Our daughter 16F sided with her father, a decision that shattered my heart into a million pieces. I still remember the day she told me she wanted to live with him full-time. Her words cut through me like a knife, leaving a wound that I wasn't sure would ever heal. "I want to live with Dad," she said, her voice steady, but her eyes avoiding mine. "He needs me more than you do." I tried to reason with her, to explain that her father's affair had torn our family apart, but she wouldn't listen. It was as if she had built a wall around herself, shutting me out completely. What hurt even more was when she started calling his affair partner Mom. The first time I heard it, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. We were at a school event, and I overheard her introducing the woman to her friends. "This is my mom," she said, gesturing to the woman who had played a part in destroying our family. I had to leave the room to compose myself. After that, I made a decision that I'm not proud of. I started ignoring my daughter. It wasn't a conscious choice at first, more of a defense mechanism to protect myself from the pain. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, it became easier to pretend she wasn't there. I threw myself into my work, taking on extra shifts at the hospital where I'm a nurse. My colleagues noticed the change in me, but I brushed off their concerns with forced smiles and vague excuses. At home, I redecorated, removing all traces of my daughter from the living spaces. Her room remained untouched, a time capsule of the life we once had. For 2 years, this was our new normal. My ex-husband and I communicated only through curt text messages about logistical matters. My daughter's attempts to reach out grew fewer and farther between until they stopped altogether. I told myself it was for the best, that she had made her choice and I was simply respecting it. Then, last week, everything changed. I was just finishing up a 12-hour shift when my phone buzzed with a text from my daughter. It was the first direct message I'd received from her in months. "Can we talk?" it read. My heart raced as I stared at those 3 simple words. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to continue the silent treatment that had become second nature. But another part, a part I thought I'd buried deep inside, yearned to reconnect with my child. With trembling fingers, I typed out a reply. When and where? We agreed to meet at a small cafe near the hospital. As I waited for her, nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, I couldn't help but wonder what had prompted this sudden desire to talk. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the defiant teenager who had chosen her father over me. In her place stood a young woman who looked lost and vulnerable. She slid into the seat across from me, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. "Mom," she began, her voice cracking, "I messed up." And then the whole story came tumbling out. Her father's new wife had given birth to a baby boy 6 months ago. At first, my daughter had been excited about having a little brother. She had even helped decorate the nursery, picking out stuffed animals and helping to assemble the crib. But as the weeks passed, she found herself being pushed to the sidelines. Her father and stepmother were consumed with the new baby, and my daughter felt like an afterthought in their new family dynamic. "They forgot my birthday last month," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "Dad called me 2 days later to apologize, but it was clear he only remembered because his wife reminded him. I listened in silence, my heart breaking all over again for my child. As much as I wanted to say, 'I told you so,' I bit my tongue. This wasn't the time for recriminations. "I'm sorry," she continued, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'm sorry for choosing him over you. I'm sorry for calling her Mom. I thought if I did everything they wanted, they'd love me more, but now I feel like I don't belong anywhere." In that moment, all the hurt and anger I'd been holding on to for the past 3 years melted away. I reached across the table and took her hand in mine. "You always have a place with me," I said softly. "Always." We talked for hours, tears flowing freely as we began the difficult process of rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't going to be easy, we both knew that. There were years of hurt and miscommunication to work through, but as we left the cafe that evening, I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in years. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. My daughter decided to move back in with me, which meant clearing out the guest room that had become my home office. As we sorted through boxes of her old things, we reminisced about happier times and tentatively began making plans for the future. It wasn't all smooth sailing, of course. There were moments of tension, old wounds that were accidentally reopened, like when I found a photo album filled with pictures of her and her stepmother smiling and happy at family events I hadn't been invited to. Or when she casually mentioned traditions they had started in her father's new family, traditions that excluded me entirely. But we were both committed to making it work this time. We started seeing a family therapist, learning how to communicate more effectively and work through our issues. Slowly but surely, we began to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. One evening, about a month after she moved back in, we were sitting on the couch watching a movie when she suddenly turned to me. "Mom," she said hesitantly, "I need to tell you something." I paused the movie, giving her my full attention. "What is it, sweetheart?" She took a deep breath. "I never stopped loving you, even when I was ignoring you, even when I was calling someone else Mom. I always loved you. I was just too stubborn and hurt to admit it." I pulled her into a tight hug, feeling her tears soaking into my shirt. "I love you too," I whispered. "I never stopped either." As we held each other, I realized that this was just the beginning of our journey. We had a lot of work ahead of us, a lot of healing to do, but for the first time in years, I felt like we were on the right path. My ex-husband wasn't happy about our daughter's decision to move back in with me. He called me late one night, his voice a mix of anger and desperation. "You're turning her against me," he accused, "just like you did during the divorce." I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm. "I'm not turning her against anyone," I replied. "She made this decision on her own. Maybe, if you hadn't been so focused on your new family, you would have noticed how unhappy she was." He was silent for a moment, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. I didn't realize," he finally said, his voice softer. "Is she okay?" "She will be," I assured him. "We're working on it." After that conversation, things began to change. My ex-husband made more of an effort to connect with our daughter, scheduling regular one-on-one time with her. It was awkward at first, but they slowly began to rebuild their relationship too. As for me, I'm learning to be a mother again. It's not always easy. There are days when the old hurt resurfaces, when I look at my daughter and remember the pain of her rejection. But then I remind myself that we're both human, both capable of making mistakes and learning from them. We're taking it one day at a time, celebrating small victories and working through setbacks together. Last week, we had our first family dinner in years. Just the two of us, but it felt like a milestone nonetheless. As I watch my daughter sleeping peacefully in her room, no longer a shrine to the past but a space that reflects who she is now, I can't help but feel grateful for this second chance. We've both made mistakes. We've both hurt each other deeply. But we're also proving that with love, patience, and a willingness to forgive, even the deepest wounds can heal. I don't know what the future holds for us. I'm sure there will be more challenges ahead. But for now, I'm cherishing every moment with my daughter, making up for lost time and building new memories together. And that, I've realized, is the most precious gift of all.